This is Marshall again, and this time I'm going to talk about witnessing techniques, and it's important to figure out how to witness effectively. Most of us Christians will start out with the Bible, as I've said before, and we'll use John 3:16. We'll talk about trying to get Mormons saved, and I've come to believe that my first job is no longer to get the Mormons saved. That's my ultimate job. That's my ultimate goal. But first, I have to convince them there's a problem. Why would I want to change churches if there's no problem in my church? Why would I want to change churches if I believe everything and everything's fine? Why do I need what you have if what I have is good enough? So that kind of thought is something we don't normally think about. And so as an ex-Mason, I had no clue there was anything wrong with Masonry because no one ever told me it was wrong. I didn't have to consider whether it was right or wrong because my parents believed it was right. I believed it was right. It wasn't until I took the oath of death I discovered it was wrong. And it was difficult for me because I had to, change gears. You're going in a certain direction, you're right, everything is perfect, and then all of a sudden there's a problem and you have to deal with that. So this is not something the Mormon's going to be happy about, to find out that he is believing a false gospel is going to go straight to hell. And I remember the first Mormon I helped out of the Mormon church, he said, Marshall, no one can tell you how important and how great it is for me that you risk offending me for the gospel's sake so I could come to know the real Jesus and the real God and go to the real heaven. And so, there's no amount of money that's ever going to pay you to get to that point where you have someone say that to you. So with that impressed me a lot. It's like, okay, I offended him. And he admitted I offended him. And I think you're going to have to figure that Jesus offended some people. So did Paul. So did Peter. Hello. If you're not going to tell the truth, then you won't have to worry about offending anyone. Just change whatever you need to change to get along. But if you're going to be like Jesus, if you're going to follow in his footsteps, he offended people because he told the truth. And they didn't want to hear it. So again, you talk to Mormons. A lot of Mormons don't like it. I don't know, really any of them that like to hear that they're wrong. Nobody wants to hear that. But the bottom line is, that's what Jesus came. He came to say, hey, you know what? You guys are a bunch of sinners. You've lost your way. You need the right direction, and Jesus is the only way. So with that, if you believe that, here's some things I discovered. When I first started, I used the anti-Mormon literature. I used somebody else's tracts. I was always using something else. And I found that if I handed out tracts, nobody seemed to want them. And I would hand a tract to somebody who says, no, I don't want that. I would maybe get, luckily, maybe 25% of the people would take my tracts, maybe only 10%. It wasn't a very, very high percentage. So I'd go out and give out tracts all day long, and, I'd give some out. And it was pretty cool. And I remember one time there was a brochure that somebody, it wasn't me, put in between the fence slots of a cedar fence at a drive-through. And a lady and her husband were driving through, and she goes, what's that in the fence? And she says, you get out and get that. And she told her husband what to do, and he'd go out and get it. He brought it back in, and it was a brochure with my name and phone number on the back of it. I used to stamp my name and phone number onto the people's tracts. It was a tract by John L. Smith, and it said, Mormons have another Jesus. And it has a picture of Jesus with no eyeballs. I mean, his eyeballs are really weird, and he's in flames. It's kind of an ugly picture, and it's a scary picture. And she read it, and she called me, and she said, hey, I got this brochure on the fence, and she said, it says that, to call you. So I called you. Why would you say Mormonism is wrong? And I said, well, I've got a lot of information. Can I come over and talk to you? Well, she was like 75 years old. And her husband was older too. And they were a little bit feeble, and they were Mormons. He had joined the Mormon church because he was a convert. She wanted him to join, and he wouldn't join for the longest time. He finally joined because his wife. So that's the story. And so I had originally, back in those days, I had original 1830 Book of Mormons I would give away. So I gave him one of these 1830 Book of Mormons printed by the church. So, I mean, you can't call this anti-Mormon literature because the church printed it. It was printed by Deseret Book. And so she took the book, and she says, I'm going to compare this. And so I left. Well, she calls me about 2 weeks later. She says, hey, I compared it. You want to come over? I'll tell you what I found. I said, sure. So I came over. Nice couple. And she opens up. She says, now this one has 2 blank pages. The other one only had 1. Okay, so what? So she goes through all these things, and she says, hey, there's this page here. And it's a page that the other one doesn't have, and it's a brief explanation of the Book of Mormon. She says, and she's reading down the whole page, and she reads the bottom to me. She says, about this edition, some minor errors in the text have been perpetuated in past editions of the Book of Mormon. and this edition contains corrections that seem appropriate to bring the material into conformity with pre-publication manuscripts and early editions edited by the prophet Joseph Smith. And I'm just going, wait a minute, hold on. You got to be kidding me. That's in there? She goes, yeah, I just read it. And she said, it's in the new one, but it's not in the old one. I said, no way. I said, this is amazing. She goes, really? I said, yeah, you found something really significant. She goes, honey, I found something significant. Honey, I found something significant, you know. It was so funny. And they got out of the Mormon church, both of them did, and they started going to Christian church, and that's what they went to until they died. And so they were really happy to find the real gospel and the real truth. And, you know, I mean, I wasn't mean about it. I gave them a gift of their own Book of Mormon, you know, and so I think a lot of it is, you know, are you going to say anything? And so, you know, I sat down with them on their couch and we went through and looked at the differences. And she goes, well, that doesn't make any sense. No kidding. Not a Mormon had ever done that with her. So you can use other people's tracts and that can be effective. You just need to be able to do what you need to do and listen to God, and God will show you what to do. I had no clue I was going to do that. So eventually I started printing my own tracts. Well, when I printed my own tracts, I discovered if somebody said, well, I don't want it, I said, well, this is a brochure that I wrote. And, you know, how often do you meet the author? And they go, oh, yeah. I said, you know, I wrote it, so it's not like, and I had a church one time I was going to, it wasn't the one I go to now, it was one I used to go to. They said, well, we don't want your tracts here anymore. We only want your theology. And I said, well, my theology is my tracts. Oh, that's what I do. The theology that I learn, I put in the tracts. I put in brochures. So I like to do props. I like to do shirts and stuff like that. So right now I'm going to give you a few things that I do. Now you notice this shirt. It's got Joseph Smith on the front. If I turn around, you can see Brigham on the back. Now it says no false prophets, and it's got a big circle and a slash to it. And it's banana yellow. So, I mean, it's like, you know, you're going to be able to see this thing, right? It is a target. Now, why would I wear something so offensive to Mormons? Because I'm actually saying, hey, I'm not Mormon. I wouldn't wear this as a Mormon, right? Well, I was at a conference in 1987, and John L. Smith was speaking at that conference, and he raised up a shirt like this, was white, and just had Joseph on the front. And he goes, this is bold. He says, now, I don't know why, but I bought two of them. And he said, this particular one is an extra, and I brought it to the conference because somebody here needs this. He said, I know somebody needs it, so I brought it to the conference. He said, mine's staying in my closet because that's too bold for me. But I got one. It's in my closet. And I thought, that's awful bold, but I'm not that bold. So I said, okay. So after the conference, I went up to his table and at the where he's selling his books and stuff. And I said, you know, I'm looking around. I said, so did you sell the shirt? He goes, what shirt? I said, you know, the one you held up? He goes, oh, this one right here. And he holds the shirt up, right? He says, you want to buy it? I go, well, my wife would shoot me. It was like $10. Back then, it was a lot of money. She'd shoot me or would bring a shirt home I'm never going to wear. You know, because, yeah, I get that one. So, you know, he said, isn't this bold? I go, oh, yeah, that's bold. I'd sure like to be that bold, you know. And so we talked about it. And then I walked on to the next table, and I walked on down. They had a row of tables, and I walked on down talking to Granny Gear and Ed Decker and different people that were there. At that time, Sandra wasn't there at that one, but she was at other ones and before and stuff. So it was a capstone conference. And so I'd met Dick Bear. I met all kinds of people there. It was really a good place to go and meet people. And then you actually go out in the street and witness. So good training environment. Anyway, so after a little while, I came back because I figured somebody else would buy it, right? So I came back and said, so you still got the shirt? She said, sure do. Pulls it back out, says, you want to buy it? I said, of course not. You know? So we talked some more about how bold it was. It's like, oh boy, that's bold, you know? So then I walked to the next table and I turned around and said, you know what? I got to buy it. So I go back and said, okay, I'm buying the shirt, you know? So plunked the $10 down, got the shirt. And I'm going, how am I going to wear this stupid shirt? You know, I'm not going to wear this thing. What am I going to do? So I go back to my motel room and I'm getting ready for bed. And I said, I could wear this thing to bed. See how bold I am? So I wore it to bed and got up the next morning and I get the button-down shirt there. And I go to get the button-down shirt. And I thought, I don't really want to change my shirt. So I got the button-down shirt and I put it on over top of the shirt. And I got Superman underwear, you know? So I did that with John L. Smith. Hey, look at this. And he goes, ha, ha, ha. I can wear this under any shirt, you know? So I think sometimes we're not born with boldness. We need to learn how to be bold for Jesus. And it's hard to do. It's you have to take that step of faith and say, well, Lord. So anyway, I brought it home, and I hadn't worn it outside yet, just, under the shirt, right? And one day I see it in my closet, and I said, you know what? I got to wear this thing someplace. I'm going to go down to the mall. So I took it down to the local mall, and I wore it, and I start at JCPenney's. I'm heading toward the Bon Marché. I get to the middle of the mall where T's, and this guy with this kid, I don't know, the kid's probably, 8 years old, and he's got a kid in his hand. He walks up and goes, so what's the shirt about? I said, well, it's Joseph Smith, Brigham. Well, I didn't have Brigham on the back. Joseph Smith, and I said, he's the founder of the Mormon Church. He goes, well, I know that. I'm Mormon. And I'm going, okay. And so I said, well, I wore this shirt so that you would be able to talk to someone who knows something about Mormonism and why it's wrong. He goes, well, it's not wrong. And so, we got into conversation. We must have talked for 20 or 30 minutes. And his son's, Daddy, what's that guy with the shirt? That's the whole thing that got him to come over, is his son saw it. And I said, what's that shirt, Daddy? So we're talking, and after 20 minutes, he did something that freaked me out. He shook my hand and thanked me for wearing the shirt so we could talk. Now that is amazing. Okay, so I thought, the shirt does something I never expected. People who are Mormon, you're going to go witness the Mormons, they don't have Mormon stamped on their forehead. The shirt sorts them out. As I wore it in Utah, I discovered that the wimpy Mormons would see the shirt and go, whoo! And they'd take off, right? Those who were fairly intellectual, some would say, and take off. Others would go, we got to talk to this boy because he's broke. We got to fix him. And they come over to fix me. And the hardcore guys would say, I am the guy who could fix this guy, and they're going to come over and talk to me, right? So I get to talk to the hardcore Mormons, the hardcore and the intellectual Mormons that want to talk. And it separates and pulls out of the crowd those who are ready to talk. So I get all the great conversations with the shirt. I had no clue it was going to work that way. My wife's like, yeah, don't wear that. It's offensive to everybody. The Mormons, the non-Mormons, don't wear that shirt. Wore it anyway because I thought, you know what? I'm seeing it work. And if it works, hey, this is a good deal. So I went to a capstone conference in Park City in 1987, and I saw John L. Smith. He had this T-shirt, and because of that dedication, I went to the conference. I saw the T-shirt. I bought the T-shirt. Big mistake, right? I take it home. My wife, what are you going to do with that stupid thing? That kind of thing. So because of all that, now I have them custom made, with Brigham on the back. So, they got to see me coming and going, right? So I got Brigham on the back. So they've got to talk to me. If I am that broke, they got to fix me. And what that does is they're giving me permission to witness to them. So what's the shirt about? Oh, that gives me permission to witness to them. Which brings me to another point, and this is not necessarily LDS point. This is a door-to-door point. Now, the Mormons go door-to-door. Why can't we, right? So the Southern Baptist Conference came to Utah, and they go door-to-door, and the Mormons were livid. Those guys can't come to our door. We have the true church. What are they doing coming to our door? Well, the prophet lectured them and said, look, we go to their door. We expect them to treat our kids with respect. We need to treat them with respect. We need to open the door and talk to them. Now, it's the first time I've ever had open door with Mormons in the street. So we would go door to door in Utah. Well, before that, I had never been door to door. And so I'm at my church with my pastor, previous church, and some big, tall Chinese guy comes in, Chinese American. And he's about this tall. His name is Russell Ng. And he's talking to the secretary because I'm in the office talking to the pastor. And so we come out, and he says, the secretary says, hey, what's our crew that goes door to door? Our group, we don't really have one of those, do we? And the pastor says, no. And he says, you don't have anybody going door to door like on Wednesday nights or nothing? No, we don't. He says, well, is there anybody in the church at all that would go with me? And he says, I don't think so. And then he looks at me and he goes, oh, yeah, there might be one, Marshall. And he goes, really? And he goes, yeah, I'd go with you. And he goes, well, when you go door to door, what do you do? I said, never been before. He says, well, no, I mean before when you went, what do you do? I said, no, I've never been before. He says, you've never been ever before? I go, no, never have. And you would go with me? I said, sure. Why would you? Because you asked. Really? I go, yeah. So he's going to train me, right? So I'm going door to door, and we get in there and we pray in our car. And so we get out, And the first house, we're walking on the sidewalk. We turn to go up to the door, and he goes, Marshall, I just don't feel right. Could you do the first door? What kind of training is that? It's like, I got to do the first door? I said, well, Russell, if I do the first door, it's not going to be anything like you ever saw before. I've never done this before, so I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'll go. He goes, well, I just don't feel right. I'm not ready yet. So could you do the first door? Okay. So I go up the first door. Don't know what I'm going to do. So I knock on the first door. Lady answers the door. Hi, we're not Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses. She goes, you're not? Well, what the heck are you then? So she just asked a question that she expects somebody to answer. She's given me permission to witness to her. Is that cool or what? We had that in the second door. He's the same thing. He's still not ready. So I knock on the second door. Hi, we're not Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses. What are you then? It's like, okay, so this was working good for me. And it's still my favorite thing to say every time I go door to door. I can't wait to say that because they look at you like, you're not? Well, what are you then? And so they just give you permission to witness to them. And it's a lot of fun. Love it. So those are witnessing techniques, and you don't get these from a book. You probably don't usually get them from a video either. So that's why this video is being made, so you can get this idea. So yellow shirt, looks ugly, looks like I'm mean, looks like I hate Mormons, That's not the case when you start finding out what the rest of the story is. And a lot of times our first impression of Mormons is like, I don't like that guy. Some of my best friends are people I don't like when I first impression. So don't just use your first impression. Think about things and listen to God. I mean, you could be doing the dumbest thing you ever thought you'd never do because it's what God wants you to do. So think about that. And so this is just witnessing techniques. This is volume 1. I'm going to give you volume 2 in the next session.